Hello friends, I'm delighted to welcome you to Holly Lolly's channel. Today I wanted to share with you what I have learned in a year, or rather a little more than a year, of living in Japan. When you come here as a tourist, it's one thing to have rose-tinted glasses. But when you start to live here and immerse yourself in the local culture, certain changes happen to you and your mind. What surprised me, what stayed the same, and what changed? Let's break this topic down, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot of interesting things. We meet different people every day. Some we see briefly and then forget, and some leave a significant mark on our lives. Imagine that communication is important to you because it is part of your consciousness, your outlook, and your personality in general. And imagine you come to Japan and it turns out that in order to communicate properly with people here, you have to learn to read the air. This is what I encountered. This concept is called kuki wa yomu. What it means and how to work with it, let's break it down. I wanted to give you an example of this Japanese reading the air. For example, you and your children are in a cafe and your children are running around the table, giggling and playing. Perhaps the Japanese man or woman at the next table will turn to you sweetly and say, "Oh, you have such wonderful children, so energetic, having so much fun." Ignorantly, you may take this as a compliment and thank them. But what they are really trying to say is that your children are preventing them from enjoying their lunch, from having normal, free conversations, and it is you who are being admonished in this way, pointing out that your children are too energetic. So it's at times like this that you have to be able to read between the lines. And to be honest, I don't always know when to read the air and when not to. For example, I try to dress more seriously in state institutions, but I can go to the dentist in a bright t-shirt or sweatshirt. I love t-shirts with different bright prints. He always says, "Oh, you've got a new t-shirt? It's got this anime or a kitten on it." And I think, is he giving me a real compliment, admiring my t-shirt? Or is he insinuating that I'm inappropriately dressed for dentistry? It's moments like these that I'm still learning to read the air. I'm thinking, gosh, do I have to read the air or not? Every time you have to be very subtle about where you have to read the air and where you don't have to read the air. I have a mood lifter here every day because I've got windows overlooking the children's center and there's kendo every day. And there's so much banging with the sticks and so much shouting. My son has started kendo too, and when they run with the stick, before they hit, they shout. It's really funny. Unfortunately, you can't film there. I tried to sneak in so discreetly to show you and not let anyone see, but if they did, there could be trouble, so you can't film in there. But these sounds, if you're interested, I can try to record them. We'll put an insert in the video so you can hear the sounds. You know, I am a very sensitive person, and when I was in my country, I always read people's moods, thought about what they were thinking at that moment. Yes, it is interesting for me to analyze, and I even considered it my ability to feel what a person wants to say, even if he or she is shy and understates something somewhere. But in Japan I felt, you know, helpless and the kind of person who always says or does something wrong. Here, for example, we thought our family had made a friend, a Japanese friend. He was so wonderful, so lovely. We even idealized him in a way, saying, "Oh my God, people like that don't exist." But that was literally until one situation. Honestly, I can't even imagine such a situation in our countries. It just so happened that this friend of ours works in a government department, and I simply asked him a question. I said I don't know who to go to with this issue. I described my question to him and I said, I don't know where to go with this, because here in Japan, everything is very differentiated, so roughly speaking, one person is responsible for the photocopier, and if that person is not at work, for example, then another person will not come to photocopy a document for me because that is not his job. So you often don't know who to turn to or where to go. I thought there was nothing wrong with asking where I could go with such and such a question, to which he replied warmly, "Oh, then you've come to the right place, you've come to me, I'll solve all your problems." I said, well, I don't think we should mix our personal and professional relationships. Just tell me which department to go to, I'll go and solve my problems and I don't want to bother you. He said, No, please contact me. I will find out everything there, solve it and come back to you with an answer. And after that conversation, the man was gone. It is also important to note that before that we had invited him to our house for dinner. It was a small event that we wanted to celebrate together. Before that we agreed on the time and date, but after this conversation he changed his mind. Oh, it's all right, it's great, I'll come a bit later. And the date of the meeting was postponed several times until we finally saw that the man did not want to communicate with us. Of course, we did not want to impose ourselves. Then we heard from our friends that it turned out to be a mistake to ask him where to go. We had to go to the institution ourselves, even if it was his own department where he worked, and ask the managers what to do with this or that question. Because a Japanese man doesn't decide anything at work. They always have to have some kind of meeting where the people who work in the department get together and make a decision together. Because every Japanese at work is afraid to take responsibility. I made the mistake of asking where I should go and he couldn't say no. By the way, it's not common for Japanese people to say no. You always have to come up with a very, very good excuse as to why you can't do it. For example, oh, it's so great, cool, and change the subject. But you can't just say no. And if I'd known that a little bit earlier, maybe we wouldn't have lost a friend. Because, honestly, I'm just so lonely here. I mean, yes, we have a family, yes, we spend time together every day, we socialize. But I've been here for about a year and a half now, and to be honest, I'm about to howl at the moon about the lack of socializing with friends. Because I really want to meet someone somewhere, even if it's rare to go somewhere with a group of friends at the weekend, to exchange energy, to communicate with other people, to learn something new. And so, when you are closed in your own space, even though each of us is developing, learning something new on our own, we still want to communicate with someone. And we have a disaster with that. It is very difficult to suddenly change and start thinking like them, to understand and accept all the peculiarities of communication. I have a lot of contradictions in my head. I don't know where to go, what to do, how to do it. And, you know, I'm not a confrontational person at all, that's the truth. But now we are actively learning Japanese, and we also have a problem here, because we are changing our 5th teacher. Before that, 4 people refused to work with us at some point under various excuses. For example, a Japanese woman who was teaching us knew my language, and I asked her. We go through all kinds of examples and we always agree and just say yes. But how can you ever say no? You're invited somewhere, but you can't really go. How do you say no? She says we can't say no. We have to say yes, that's a great offer, that would be great. And that's it, we move on to another topic. And I said, what if I really can't go? What am I going to do? And I probably put her in a dead end, in an awkward situation, because of course she tried to explain it to me. But after this lesson she told us that unfortunately she has a very busy schedule, she can no longer teach us. I think, how am I going to live here? How am I supposed to ask anyone anything? Because you don't seem to want to put a Japanese person in an embarrassing situation, but how do you behave? For example, our neighbor came to visit us to make friends. She gave us a present and we gave her a present in return. And she says let's go to the gym together at 5:20 in the morning. And to be honest, I work every day until 3 o'clock in the morning. And it is very difficult for me to get up at 5:20 to go jogging or to go to the gym when I have to wash, get dressed, get ready, get the kids ready. I can't say, oh, great, let's go tomorrow and then close the door tomorrow and not show up. I'm not going to do that, am I? I've got to say no in the right way. She says, so, shall we go? I say great, but I can't. She goes on to say, okay, you can't today. But tomorrow? I say, I can't tomorrow either. I'm working till 3 a.m. And then she says, is that a no? And I was confused. I said, I can't, I'm sorry. And then I could see that she was really offended, upset. She apologized, she left, and she hasn't even said hello to us since. So how do you deal with situations like that? And I want to find an encyclopedia on communication because I don't know how to read the air in those moments. I mean, I read it in this situation and I understand that she wants us to go to the gym with her. But how do you say no without saying no? And when you're clearly told that you have to be somewhere tomorrow and you're not in the mood for it at all. That's how difficult communication can be in Japan. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Please write in the comments. It will be very, very interesting to discuss it with you, maybe communicate with you somewhere. By the way, I really, really miss socializing. So please write. I will be happy to answer you and to see that you are interested in these topics at all. Of course, all this may seem strange and even a little wild to us. But why does it happen? Let's get to the bottom of it. Japan is an island country. Since ancient times, the Japanese have grown rice, and they had collectivism, they lived in communities, and it was very important that the community worked together, that no one quarreled with anyone. Otherwise, if you behave badly in a community, that is, if you start a conflict, you will quickly be kicked out and you will be left without a house, without food, without anything. So it was very important for the Japanese to maintain this collectivism and that no one ever argued with anyone, no conflicts. It is very important for them to keep up up appearances, so even if you think something different, the main thing is not to argue, not to conflict, to pretend that you think like another person, to try not to offend them. In this way, you put the interests of that person above your own. Thanks to this, you will never see Japanese people involved in any kind of street quarrel, having it out with someone. Never. In general, the Japanese are always trying to smooth over rough edges, never to get indignant, never to say that something is wrong. Although you will probably never know what they really think, the Japanese even say they have two faces. One, hone, is the true face, your own face, and tatamaya is the public face, the behavior that is expected of you and approved of by society. There are high-context countries, where most of the information is hidden inside a person, and low-context countries, where you can freely express your thoughts, express your opinion about something. In high-context countries, these are countries like Japan, China, Korea, Vietnam, and others. Nobody will tell you directly what they think, their thoughts. Even if you are wrong, no one will tell you that. And there is also communication by hints in such countries. In our country, this kind of communication is called reading between the lines and is rarely used. Here it is not accepted that your opinion differs from that of others, and every time you have to read a person, look carefully at the expressions of emotion, facial expressions, body language, body movements. And if, for example, a person's intonation changes, if their voice goes up or down a little bit, that is all important. And you have to read the air in time, correctly, at the right moment, and understand what the Japanese meant when they said this or that. In other words, what you are told is almost never the same as what they actually mean. I also wanted to discuss with you such an important point as the workaholism or work addiction of the Japanese. Is it really the way it is typically described, the way it is talked about? And first of all, I wanted to stress that I am giving you my personal opinion. It is based on the fact that I go somewhere every day, I see something, I come to some conclusions, and they may be different from other people's opinions or from the information that is spread on the internet. I'm just going to share it with you, tell you what I think about it, and I'm interested in what you think about it. But don't take my words as if absolutely everyone is going to tell you the same information. This is how I see it, and I'm sharing my opinion with you. About workaholism, you know, I have a bit of a dual feeling about it. I would divide the Japanese into two categories. For example, those Japanese who run their own businesses and work for themselves, they are like gods to me. You know, like an ant that works, that carries everything, that carries a load heavier than itself on its back and works hard all the time. For me, those are the Japanese who have started their own business, even if it is small, and are working at it. For example, I often eat in different cafes. I think the food here is not expensive, it's basically cheap, it's very tasty, it's varied, and that's why, for example, I'd rather save time for something else, go somewhere, order something, buy something ready-made, eat it, than spend a lot of time cooking, for example. It's convenient for us. For our family, we often go out to eat. And what we notice is that sometimes one person really works for the whole restaurant. Imagine a place where there are 7 or 8 tables, and one person works there. One person in the kitchen, one person as a waiter, so it's the same person, and it's the same person working the cash register. I just have my mind blown because this person runs out, takes orders quickly, very often without even writing them down. At the first, second, third, fourth table, then he comes running into the kitchen, immediately sets up a bunch of pans, frying food, cooking. I've had the most delicious noodles in Harajuku. The spaghetti there is divine. And in that place, one person does everything. We came to Japan 8 or 9 years ago as tourists, and that was the first time we went to this place. It was very tasty, and we were surprised to see that there was one person working, running around, doing all the work. We realized that it was his place, but he was running it. And he served us our food, I don't know, probably within 5 to 7 minutes. And it was the freshest, most delicious, with seafood. And then when you've finished eating, you go to the cash register, he sees it, he drops everything he's doing and comes to you. Even if there's something frying on the hob, he never burns anything. He would quickly check out the customers, run back to the kitchen, do a few things, come back to the people, take orders. Can you imagine that in a restaurant in your town? One person doing all the work, taking orders, cooking and processing the customers' payments. And what's more, I've seen him rush the dishes into the dishwasher. I mean, it's kind of unreal for me. And the place is open 12 hours a day. Of course, I can mislead you a little bit about the time frame, but for example, he works from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And it seems that this person works without a day off. I don't know, of course I don't go there very often, but every time I go there I see the same person. It just makes my brain go crazy. And I've seen a lot of such places where one person does all the work. And even if it's early in the morning and there are no customers. For example, we were sitting alone, the whole place was empty. And it seemed like the perfect moment to sit down and take a break from work. No, it's not customary to sit at work here. This man takes a cloth and goes to clean the windows, although these windows seem to be clean, but he is always in a hurry, always at work. Here he has already come in and wiped the dust off the lamp. His work is very organized, everything has to be clean. And if there were only a few people in the morning, then a lot of people came. He still runs around, serves everyone, he manages to do everything. And in our country, you wait 40 minutes for an order, you look at your watch and think, what's going on? I want to say, read my air. I'm looking at my watch, it means I'm late. Well, that's one category of people. And what I see very often in some state institutions, you come and you are baffled because even if you have a single tiny question for them, it will take 3 hours to answer that question. They will call a delegation of 5 people. They write everything down, they discuss it. There is such a thing in Japan as opening your My Number, your tax number, and imagine that you have already brought a photo, you have brought all documents, you just have to issue this My Number. Here 5 people will be called again, they will communicate, they will discuss, write something, and in general they will spend 3 hours to make this poor card for one person. I would like to say, go and learn from the cafes where one person works for everyone, from the people who do everything so quickly, who cook everything. But here every decision takes a huge amount of time. Or, for example, I have a story about how we tried for 2 weeks to get a Japanese SIM card. When we arrived, of course, we used our SIM cards first, and it just cost a lot of money. Even for little things like Googling something, using a translator, it just cost a fortune. So I really needed a local SIM card. We went to the shop to buy a SIM card. First we wanted to buy a tourist card, but they said, oh, you still need a resident card because this card is not for calls. And yet the tourist SIM card gives you very few megabytes and they were used up very quickly. I said I want a normal SIM card. I have a resident card. It is valid for a year. They looked at it and said the resident card didn't have a residence registration. We actually didn't have it because we lived in hotels for a year. I will tell you later in this video why we had to live in hotels for almost a year. It's also an interesting story. So, the manager said, you don't have a residence registration. We need a residence registration in your resident card to sell you a SIM card. We went to the hotel to sort this out. We said we need a residence registration. The hotel, of course, also called a whole delegation. They decided and discussed this issue together. In general, we agreed that we would book a room for 2 months and they would give us a residence registration. So we checked into the hotel. I happily went back. I said, here is my residence registration. I need to get a SIM card. They looked at my papers again. And as they breathe in the air, I realize, I read the air, that it means they want to refuse me. They're just looking for an excuse for me to say no, actually. And finally they say, oh, you don't have my number. That's the card I told you about. I did it to get a SIM card in Japan. And honestly, I don't remember what the third excuse was. We came again. We said we have this. We have that. What else do we need? I think they cited the fact that they didn't have anyone who spoke English. Okay, we'll communicate in Japanese. We'll have an interpreter. Oh, that's not allowed. Sorry. Anyway, they turned us down, so we went to another bank, SoftBank. And what do you think they told us? Oh, it's such a tight schedule. You've got 3 adults here, that's 2 hours each. That's 6 hours. Take a day off work to come in and spend the whole day opening your SIM cards. I thought, oh my god. Anyway, on the third attempt we went to another SoftBank where a Japanese man took pity on us and organized everything for us in about 20 minutes, did everything, and we finally got SIM cards. He helped us connect them. He told us something in English. I used to think I didn't speak English very well, but in Japan I realized I did. And we signed everything, and photocopies were made. And finally we got our long-awaited SIM cards. The whole process took 2 weeks, and each time we were turned away, it was not very pleasant. Just because we're foreigners, they didn't want to deal with us. They were afraid of us, and it's easier to say no. Let us go somewhere else. Let us ask another worker so that other people deal with us. It's easier for them than to deal with this process now by themselves. And I realized that if we had gone to the previous place, we would have spent 6 hours on the SIM cards. But we found another place where we literally had a person do the job for us in 20 minutes. So, honestly, I would argue about how much of a workaholic the Japanese are. It all depends on whether a person is just waiting for a paycheck or working for their own business. There is also a lot of talk about the Japanese being overworked. Why overwork? Because in Japan, if your boss hasn't left yet, it's disrespectful to leave early. So they often wait, even if they don't have any work to do. They just sit there. And by the way, it's profitable. because overtime is paid, I think, 1.5 or double the regular wage. So very often everybody waits for the boss to leave, and then the rest of the staff leaves too. And of course we should not forget that they have a very strong alcohol culture. When I first arrived, I lived in a noisy part of town, Akasaka, and I saw this every day, when Japanese people in a group of colleagues, which can be seen from the way they dress, ties and jackets, go out to drink beer after work. The Japanese get drunk very quickly. They like to eat a lot of meat and snacks and then walk each other home. I saw a funny situation when a Japanese was walking along the wall to get to the metro, and the other one turned him the other way and said, "You have to go to another metro." But you know, with all this, there are never any drunken brawls, conflicts, fights. It's even kind of nice, because a drunken Japanese, he's a harmless Japanese. I don't know, you even want to help him. They drink a lot, but they need it for work. Because if you refuse, if you say to the boss, "No, I'm not going to the bar tonight," then you probably won't be invited the next time. And it can also help your career. If you're constantly finding favor in the eyes of your bosses, constantly going to these events. This is the culture, a bit strange for us. But when you live in Japan, you have to understand that you have to accept their culture, their mentality, or you have to leave, otherwise there is no other way. You can't live your whole life with a completely different worldview and see opposite things happening around you, because you will be in eternal conflict with yourself. You will not live in harmony. For example, I consider myself lucky that I don't work in a Japanese office. I work online, and so I don't go anywhere. I can only observe from the side what's going on there, outside. I don't know, maybe that's a disadvantage for me because I've been learning Japanese for a long time, but I don't know it. I can't practice it on the street. Even when I try to talk to a Japanese person in Japanese, they do not answer me in sentences from a book. The book gives you a phrase that a Japanese person is supposed to use to answer your question, and even the tutor still teaches from books the phrases that Japanese people are supposed to say in different situations. I say the Japanese don't speak in sentences from a book. I never understand what they're telling me. It's extremely embarrassing because when you try to switch to English, the Japanese just scratch their heads. They don't know English. It's very difficult to communicate like that. I don't know when the moment will come when I will finally have a miracle and I will finally be able to communicate in Japanese, because right now I feel very helpless. I feel like giving up. I cry very often. I sob. I say that's it. I'm going to pack my bags and I'm going to leave. I don't know where, but I'm going to leave somewhere, because it's very, very difficult. If you want to understand my situation, imagine, for example, a day in your country where you only communicate with a translator. You just say hello, excuse me, and put everything else into the translator. What happens in such a case? Often people don't want to, they feel uncomfortable communicating in this way. They apologize politely, sumimasen, and go about their business. But it often happens that they start to read, they try to understand what you want, they try to explain something to you. Even the most elementary things are difficult. For example, if you want to buy something, and in general any question that may arise, not only in a foreign country, but in life in general, and you are mute at that moment, you cannot say anything, you write everything into the translator, and if you have written a slightly complicated phrase, the translator will translate it incorrectly. Sometimes you get translations that people can't even begin to understand. The Japanese don't understand the translation, they say something back to you, the translator translates it back. But now you don't understand anything. That's why I often invite a professional interpreter to solve difficult problems. But it is not easy because you have to arrange a time with him, not always a time that suits you, and you have to arrange that time with the institution where we are going. And every time you have to live with the fact that you have to ask someone, hire someone to solve every problem. Of course, I am used to solving all the problems myself here, but it is very difficult without knowing the language. So if you are planning to move to Japan, for example, be prepared that English will not help you at all. You will need good conversational Japanese. Or, if you are as risky as I am, you will have to live with an interpreter and spend a very long time trying to learn Japanese, and be prepared that you will not be able to speak it immediately, not at once, to speak it correctly, to speak it so that you are understood, to help you solve some problem. And you know, Japan often seems to me to be an ideal country, and if you look at it superficially, it is very safe, comfortable, delicious, so there are a huge number of undeniable advantages to living here. But there are some disadvantages, which I have told you about, which are very difficult to accept and understand, I would say. As you may have noticed, I often use a translator in my daily life, approaching people, showing them the translation and asking for help. It was a real discovery for me that not all Japanese understand all the kanji, that is, not all the characters. Very often there are situations where you're buying equipment or something else in an ordinary shop. You go up to a salesman, show him your translation, and he reads it and doesn't understand what you need. And then he calls another consultant, a colleague who can read kanji. Because it's not always possible to find a person who knows all the characters. If everyone used hiragana and katakana, I'd be happy, because at least I can read them. But I'm just learning kanji, and it's very important how you draw that curl from top to bottom or from bottom to top. It's important to write it correctly. And of course, because so many people use keyboards in everyday life, the Japanese themselves say that they've forgotten how to write by hand, and that's why there are difficulties in reading all characters and syllables. So the number of characters you know determines your level of education. The better your university degree, the more you have studied, the easier it will be for you to read all kinds of texts. And of course, if you're a college graduate, they say that even reading a newspaper, an ordinary newspaper, can be difficult because you don't know all the kanji. For me, that's a horror. Imagine we were reading a book and we didn't understand all the words. It's great and interesting to learn, but it's frustrating that you have to study for so many years, and no matter how much you study, you can't read everything. When a character is combined with another character, there can be very many different readings, so for me these topics are still a bit of a shock when learning Japanese. I'm not there yet. I want to at least learn how to communicate with Japanese people. I'm not saying to read all the kanji. I'm not setting myself that kind of task yet. Oh, they also tell me that there are often dialects depending on the region you live in. For example, if a person from Osaka comes to Tokyo and starts communicating with people in the city using the Osaka dialect, they may not understand him in Tokyo. As promised, I will of course tell you why we moved from place to place for a whole year. There were even times when we lived in one place for a week, 10 days, a fortnight. We moved a lot. At first we counted how many hotels, Airbnbs and places we changed, but then we just lost count. The last time we moved, we even rented a whole truck to somehow fit all our stuff in. Anyway, what happened? Why we moved so much? When we first came to Japan, we only had 3 or 4 suitcases. I can't remember exactly how many. It was year-round stuff, for everyone in the family, plus shoes. We took the bare minimum. And here in Japan, of course, we began to buy more things to make our lives comfortable. We have children who need to learn, to develop, to go to different classes. They also need desks with chairs to write on, books to read, toys to play with. So, even though we were constantly moving, we had lived there for a year, and things had started to pile up until our belongings had grown to incredible proportions. The thing is, it's incredibly difficult for foreigners to rent accommodation in Japan. I mean, if you're a student, for example, and you live alone, or at most with another person, and you come to Japan, of course it's easy to rent a 12 square meter flat. You know, the kind of place where you open the door and immediately fall on the bed and nothing else. It's easy to find that here, of course, but if you are in a situation like ours, and we happen to be a family of 5, it is quite difficult to rent a suitable flat. We are not going to split into 2 flats. We are not going to say to our children, you live in one flat and we will live in the other. We need one big flat so that we can all live together, 5 people, and we need some space for everyone. I also have children of different sexes, but I don't even mention that they need their own rooms. It's pointless to talk about it here in Japan, and if you go to an estate agent and say that you need at least a 2-bedroom flat for 5 people, when of course it would be better to have a 3-bedroom flat, they look at you like you are crazy. I mean, I'm not asking you to give it to me for free. I'm willing to pay whatever it costs. And there was even this unpleasant moment when I approached an agency, and the girl practically laughed at me, saying, "Do you really want a 2-bedroom apartment in Japan? Come on!" And she actually insulted me a little bit because she said, "What were you thinking when you went to Japan? What else do you want? Live in a 1-bedroom apartment and don't complain." I felt uncomfortable. I didn't expect that reaction, especially since I hadn't done anything wrong to deserve it. Also, if you approach a Japanese-speaking agency without knowing Japanese, it's better not to approach them at all. They prefer dealing with Japanese clients and are often hesitant to rent to foreigners. To be honest, I don't understand it. I always compare it to the luxurious flats we rent in our countries, often furnished. Sometimes there are restrictions, like no pets allowed, but if you have the money, you can find comfortable and well-equipped accommodations. Here, they give you completely bare walls, nothing at all, and at best, some plain wallpaper. I don't understand. Are they afraid that foreigners will ruin the place, burn it down? Or what do they think they are going to do with this flat that they are so reluctant to provide basic furnishings? They don't give you furniture, they just rent you an empty box, and seem hesitant even about that. If the flat is tiny, a studio flat, you know, a big wardrobe, as I would call it, then it is easy to rent such accommodation. But renting a 2-room flat is questionable, and 3-room flats are practically impossible. In order to find such an apartment, you first need to find an agency that works with foreigners, and there you will definitely need a guarantor. The guarantor is a Japanese person who will take a bank certificate of their income. You will also need to open an account in a Japanese bank, and you also have to prove that you have the means to live there for the next 2 to 3 years. By the way, I am here with a resident card for only 1 year. I can and want to rent an apartment for a year, but they tell me that you can only rent for 2 or 3 years or more. And if you decide to leave after a year and break the lease early, you have to pay penalties. And I don't even know if I'll be living here next year. I only have a residence card for 1 year. Another problem is that we don't know any Japanese people. Even if we did, how can you approach someone with your problems and ask, "Will you be my guarantor?" You have to show your bank account and assure them that you can cover all our debts if we move out early. It's a strange situation. In our countries, you typically need a very close relationship to ask someone you know to be your guarantor. Just an acquaintance or a friend of a friend wouldn't usually agree, and it feels wrong to ask. Of course, we don't have anyone like that in Japan, so our rental applications have been rejected. Each time we were offered a 15 square meter apartment, but we just couldn't fit in there. So we would move from hotel to hotel and then find Airbnb options. But when there were big holidays, Golden Week or Christmas, it became almost impossible to move. There might be one offer for all of Tokyo on Airbnb, and we would move there with all our stuff, and we would move there for a week or 2. And then we'd pack all our stuff up again and dismantle the tables. It is also important for our children's health that they train on a pull-up bar. We bought a freestanding pull-up bar and we had to transport it every time. Each time we had to move the furniture we bought. Because of such challenging constant moves throughout the entire year, each subsequent relocation was really taking a toll on me. Pardon the expression. But now, thank God, we live in a flat. It's small, but it's a 3-room flat. To be honest, we can barely fit in here. I can hardly find a corner. I tidy it up so that I can somehow record video. And the back of me is a storage space, because there's nowhere else to put things. I give things away all the time. I even put up adverts. In my country, for example, I used to give away bags of clothes. Those ones that were in good condition, but I always wrote pickup only. I knew people would come, take it and be grateful. People here don't want to come and take it. They want to receive all these bags and bundles by post. I think it's easier to throw it away. And throwing it away is also a problem because of the way waste is sorted. Fabrics, for example, are taken out once a month. So you have to be there at 8 in the morning to take out everything you want to throw away and pack it up properly. And if you have equipment that you no longer need, that's broken or for any other reason, you will need to dispose of it. In this case, you'll need to arrange for a chargeable collection, especially if the equipment is bulky. That's why, by the way, it's said that there are a lot of places here where, for free or very cheap, people donate or resell their stuff. Sometimes they just give it away. But it's often things like a piano, for example. And you think, oh my God, how can we move it here, transport it? We barely have enough space here as it is. I've looked at the things that are given away on these sites, but when you see something nice, like a nice big wardrobe, then you look at your little area and you think, where am I going to put it? No, I'm not going to get it. We generally have one wardrobe for everyone here. Practically nothing fits in there. We've bought these cupboards. It's hard to call them cupboards. They're very, very flimsy, so they're easy to dismantle and transport. There's a big problem with housing in general. The Japanese, they work very hard. They leave home early and only come home for the night, and they spend their weekends in the streets, in parks, having fun with their families. We, who sit at home a lot and work, feel uncomfortable because the flat is so small, you know, like a shell. There is very little space. It's very depressing. But I know it's our choice. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you what the conditions are because I know that a lot of people write comments to me asking me how to move to Japan, what to do, what difficulties you might encounter. And that's why I've decided to describe in detail what's happening here, so that you can evaluate and visualize this situation for yourself. For example, you may or may not encounter similar challenges yourself. I want to highlight the difficulties and nuances, knowing that if you're watching, you likely have an interest in Japan. Whether you're considering a move or simply want to learn more about the country, I'm sharing our experiences with you. By the way, I've been asked about the weather in the comments. What is the weather like in Japan? When is the best time to come? Because everyone knows that it is advertised to everyone, it is imposed that the best time to come is during the cherry blossom season. By the way, as tourists, we came to Japan twice before we moved. Each time we were guided by these calendars that tell you when it's best to come. You get tickets in advance, you buy them, and then you get there and you're disappointed. The first time we went, the sakura had already finished blooming. We literally saw the last of the leaves. And the second time, we bought the tickets a little bit in in advance, but the winter was still delayed, so when we arrived, the buds were just starting to bloom and we missed the cherry blossoms again and left regretting that we had miscalculated the dates again. I think, well, at least this time we have come for a long time. We live here, we will finally see sakura. Yes, this year we finally saw sakura. It's really very, very nice. You know, I'd say it's probably exaggerated and over-publicized. Because how does it actually happen? You see a picture in your head of how you are going to get there. You are going to admire beautiful flowers, you are going to take cool photos, and you are going to be happy. But in reality, you are standing in the wildest queue to take a picture with a tree. Everyone is looking at you and you are uncomfortable. Of course, no one is being aggressive, no one is sighing, no one is looking at their watch, no one is trying to kick you out. But they're all standing there, waiting, and you feel awkward because there's a huge queue to be photographed and it's quicker to give the next person the chance to be photographed. There are also a lot of people in the parks at this time. It's like being at a very popular beach resort. I remember when I used to go to the seaside with my mother as a little girl about 20 years ago, we could hardly find a spot to lay our blankets on the beach. Just as we struggled to find a sunny spot on the beach back then, it's the same here now. Everyone likes to spend time outdoors, have picnics, take mats, take food. And when you go for a walk in the park, there are so many people there, like there is some kind of concert or festival going on. This is, you know, expectation reality, where you want to take a beautiful photograph, but in the end you just look for a way to get through, how to squeeze in so as not to hurt anyone, and you, so that no one hurts you. There are a lot of tourists. I probably went out twice and I was a bit shocked by what I saw, because, of course, in every courtyard there is at least one tree in bloom, and even then there are a lot of people who come to take pictures or just to admire the beauty of the tree. So to see a lot of colorful, beautiful sakura trees, like on Instagram and in TikTok, you have to go to a place where everyone goes. As you can imagine, the whole city and the whole suburbs come there, and a lot of tourists go to see these sakura. So, of course, the most comfortable climate is in autumn and spring. You're not hot, you're not cold, you generally feel great. And in those seasons you fall more and more in love with Japan. I probably wouldn't recommend coming here in the summer. Everyone says Okinawa is beautiful. I wanted to go there this year, but it happened that we were about to go. We were about to buy tickets, and there was a tsunami, a typhoon, and of course we decided not to go. Even though everyone admires it, they say it's very, very cool there. But there are these natural disasters, so you have to take that into account. And the summer here is insanely hot, it's very humid. So when you go outside it's like you're in a steam room, in a sauna, you can't breathe. You immediately want to find a place where you can cool down. Sometimes the heat is unbearable. Many people say that Japan has pleasant winters. In some areas here, winters are really dry and cool. For example, I walked around in autumn boots in the winter, and I was fine in them. But Japan still has the strongest, most terrible winds in winter, and the humidity can be high because of the winter monsoons. The cold is particularly severe. I don't know how the poor children walk around in this weather. They wear school uniforms with skirts or shorts, bare feet, and just socks and a t-shirt on top. It's 5 degrees here. The average in our area is 5 degrees a lot of the time, and it is very humid and windy. I felt very, very uncomfortable in this weather. I was wrapped up in all the warm clothes I had, and there was the impression that there would be a lot of snow because the weather was so frosty. But there was never any snow. Such a delusion. A trick. I long for snow. I love it. So, it's comfortable to walk, to stroll here. There's no slush, no puddles, no mud. You can walk comfortably. But it can be uncomfortable because of the wind. There was a time when we lived near the river and the wind was so strong that it was difficult to stand on your feet. It was very frosty. If you plan to come to Japan as a tourist, it is certainly better to choose autumn or spring. Friends, I really hope that this video was interesting, entertaining, and maybe even informative for you. I will be very happy to make new videos for you. Please write in the comments which topics you would like me to record new videos on, and if I see that the topic is popular, write actively. Of course I will be happy to record a new video for you. I'm very interested. Thank you very much. I am happy to stay in touch with you. A great arigato for watching and see you in the new videos. Bye!